Hello, everybody. Grant Hunter here for another Product Conversations. Steve, May, and I were trying to figure out a topic for this week. And I was going through the list of literally, we've done over 150 of these conversations. And it blew my mind. We never did one on the business role of product management. I mean,
despite the fact that we are continuously talking about the business role of product management.
I mean, can you believe that?
No, it's surprising. I agree.
And so we decided we should have that conversation.
Sure.
And May, I wanted to bring you in for a second. I want to appreciate May has made, at least first to my knowledge, meme of me as a part of her posts. So any thoughts on before we kick the conversation off, May?
You're very memeable, but no. Seriously though, I think this is something that gets brought up a lot, but I don't think it's something that people spend too much time thinking about because we're too preoccupied with the execution of our role. And I think it's time to step back and talk about like, why is it so hard to do product management? And I think it boils back down to the role, like as it keeps coming up in all our conversations.
Completely and totally. And we've put together an amazing panel. As I said to Sogol when we were talking before we started, anybody who May says is an early mentor of hers has a ton of respect because they've helped craft an amazing product management thinking mind. We've got now May probably is now past Jason, but Jason, I still think you might be on the top 3 of all time panelists for product conversations, even though you haven't been on one in over a year. So Jason Vincelette, one of my favorite people to talk product with, and Scott Selhorst. I mean, if anybody's been around a while, Tyner Blaine has been one of the best blogs on Tyner Blaine, right? So you're on mute, Scott.
Yeah, it is Tyner. Fight Club totally messed me up with that.
Okay. But one of the best thinkers in product management and also in the business role of product management. So amazing panel for this conversation. And I'm going to start out, I think of the 3 chart, right? There's the technology and the UX and the business chart that everybody says, and product management lives in the middle. And is that where product management lives, or is product management the business circle? Let's get to it. Is product management a business role? And I'm going to start with Jason on this.
Yeah, we go into roles and titles, and it gets to be sticky rabbit hole, if you will. But I've always seen product management as a business role.
Yep.
Primarily. We have a lot of technologists, lots of people could do technology. That is where a lot of passion is. And the companies really need somebody who can look at the product holistically as, throughout the entire organization and throughout all departments, and really, how is the product affected by all the organizations? How does it serve? And, I keep hearing that we can always find technologists, but I need somebody who can really holistically understand the product and all those pieces. And that includes the business aspects of the product.
I love it, Jason. I'm going to go with the order people came in. So Sogol, thoughts? Is product management a business role?
I absolutely think that business has if we want to give it the priority, has the biggest weight.
Yep.
In terms of like, you need to understand the business and you need to understand the industry you in before you can like put in any type of solution out there and then look at it from different angles, how it's gonna be done, or how the UX gonna play into it or whatnot. So yeah, I definitely think that the knowledge of business is very, very important.
Completely and totally agree. Our friend Saeed Khan often says that too often we put the emphasis is put on the first word, product, and where it should be put on the second word, management, right? And it's the management of the product. May, same question to you.
I think the thing about the word the business is it's quite controversial if you talk about it in an organization, right? So one of the things that I like to do when people bring up the business when I'm doing my first round of, you know, meet and greets, one-on-ones to better understand the context of the organization, you'll get the word the business from almost every single person who you talk to. And one of my favorite things to ask them is, okay, so what or who is the business? And you'll find that you'll get 20 different answers from 20 different people. And until that is aligned, that people understand who it is that we are serving with the products that we build, and what it is that the business overall is doing and trying to do as a whole, I I don't think we can we talk about the business role of product management without talking about what the business is? Because for the most part, like if you are working in a product organization building products, your business is that product. If it's an internal product, if you have a separate like P&L or separate division where you have control over how you spend, your business is still that product. The overall organization or organizations you might serve might have a different business, but like you still have to think about your customers. But whatever is the top section here that like coheres all these different pieces, that's the business.
It's interesting. I've written some stuff about how all companies, not just technology companies, need product management, right? And what it comes down to, and I've done this with like roofing companies, right, who also got into windows and then got into siding. And I'm like, somebody has to make a decision of where you're going to put resources, right? Where we're going to optimize our resources. And within that, I'll call it GM type model where you have general manager, not General Motors, type model where somebody owns a P&L for their product. You're managing the business of that product. You're responsible for the results and the return on the investment in those types of things. And for me, it comes down to, so there's, maybe we're getting meta on this when it comes to, there's levels of what you mean by business. There's the business of the product. There's the business of the organization and across the organization. So many ways we can go with this. Steve, I'm going to go to you next again, because I said I was going to go in the order that people joined, and that's the way I'm doing it. So, business role. You've been talking about this for a long time.
Yeah, I wrote a post recently about how Agile destroyed product management. So many product people, or I guess I should just say product owners, are former engineers. And so over the course of the 20 years since the Agile Manifesto, it feels that we're getting ever more into the technical of it all. And product managers or product owners are doing design, they're doing project management, they're doing task assignments. And I'm like, those are all really important things, but they're not product management. And so, anyway, I've been writing about the business or the strategic role of product management for much of my career. And I think, you nailed it earlier in quoting Saeed. It's like the important word there is not product, it's management. And, it's kind of funny. I have a different way of talking about product marketing. In product marketing, the first word is the important word, product, because it seems like there are so many people who have lowercase product and uppercase marketing in those product marketing roles.
Actually, I love how you did that because it's true. Awesome. And Scott, I also want to save you for last because you come from the engineering side. My whiteboard back here on this side, we were whiteboarding together a little while back, and he was giving me some engineering lessons and system thinking type stuff. You've came from engineering into product. I'd love to get your take on this business role.
Yeah. So unfortunately, the downside of going last, instead of being the person with the last word, I'm the person who's, got everybody's already said all the smart stuff. if I approach this from the other way, and we all came from somewhere else, because right, it wasn't like you started in product. Nobody, and I still kind of question whether anybody should start in product.
I
Like
agree.
I think there is some sort of anchor or foundational perspective that you need to be building upon. But you said systems thinking, so I guess my riff will go in that direction. Somebody has to decide how much you're willing to spend, and whether or not there's an opportunity worth exploring or exploiting. Somebody is bringing that business conversation to the conversation, or that, right? Like, how much are you willing to spend? How many of your people are you going to allocate? How much resource are you going to dedicate? All of those choices. I made a meme-ish post earlier today, or earlier this week, where I still get flustered by teams who seem to have a really good beat on the cost of everything and the value of nothing, because they're operating within cost centers.
Mhm.
They're tying into the, I estimate to build this, it's going to take this much. Okay, great. Why are you building that? What's that worth? Can you get the same value with half of that? Do you need twice as much of that to get the value? Are you going to build that and then fail because it doesn't matter? It's necessary, but not sufficient to be good enough for your customers. You also have to be the best choice from their point of view. So you have to be better than your competitors, which the reason that matters is because that's driving the return on the investment. And so somebody has to bring the return into the conversation, or all you've got is a denominator.
I'll be honest. I've seen plenty of places that don't have either. They don't have the value or the cost. They don't understand any of those aspects. And it just becomes that feature factory, that build trap, where it's just like, it's a cost center just delivering and delivering. And then the business stakeholders, sales and leadership are like, why is it not done? Because to your point, it's not sufficient.
Yeah,
I'm reminded, Scott, before you go on, something you made a point of a moment ago reminded me of a scene from Jurassic Park, where they said the scientists focused on whether they could do it, but nobody really thought about whether they should. And as we saw from Jurassic Park, that was fundamentally a bad business decision.
Yeah, and in the age of as AI turns the hockey stick, that's a meme I predict will show up a lot more.
Yeah.
The Grant, like, I think an interesting way for me to think about it is somebody is making that business decision, however sloppily.
Yeah.
And so then just unpacking it, it could be somebody saying, I imagine very loosely that there is a big benefit that comes from building something, right? They are doing both the market assessment and the solution ideation in their head. And then they tell people, go build this thing. And that was it. Like, it was totally encapsulated. It happened. It just didn't happen with rigor. And then, so we can help put rigor into it. And then we can also hit some of the dysfunctions of decoupling all the people who are figuring out what it actually needs to be from the person who imagined it in the first place. So there's lots of collaboration patterns and problems that decouple the teams doing stuff from the people deciding what might be worth pursuing. All of that to come back to say, if product management isn't the business role in that team, what is?
Yeah. Well, we got a continuum, right? Steve and I often talk about the pendulum, right? And how the pendulum has sort of came fully back, and with the Agile Industrial Complex sort of has pulled product management into the technical space. I'd love to get everybody's taste. Do we feel like product management as a whole, and there's so many different, segments and practices within it, but has product management become too technical as a whole? Do we see movement for it coming back towards, maybe the right equilibrium? Jason?
Can I answer your question
ahead.
by rephrasing it into a different question? Are we
Probably a
putting
better
the
question.
product role? Are we putting the product role label on the wrong things? Is the wrong label on the box?
So are there a whole bunch of people in agile organizations or organizations doing digital transformations who have product manager titles who really aren't doing product management?
Oh, 1,000%. Like that's who I've spent the last 20 years helping.
So we don't want to fix this problem, in other words, Scott. Right?
Dude, I'm getting tired. You know, if we could fix the problem, then I could reap the rewards as a consumer of better products.
Well, there's that. But on the other hand, you know, if there weren't these places that were so amazingly screwed up, you and I would not have, you know, employment. So
I'd have to go back to engineering, and I don't know that I've got the chops to compete with today's engineers.
oh, well, you just have AI now.
Yeah.
I'm never in a product conversation these days that don't end up in talking about AI. Thank you, Steve, for getting us there quicker. I feel like that's the end before we all just go, okay, whatever, and we just end the show. So I've had a realization. I host a product camp, and May does the same kind of thing, a product in pints, I call it, monthly, and I get to interview regional product managers. So this is a very topical call, because I've actually almost had, we don't want to classify, but I have a new classification for product management in different businesses. And if anybody knows the Charlotte area, we're heavy in banking. This is where Bank of America is. This is where Wells Fargo and all of the supporting organizations. And they look at product management very differently. And so when I'm talking to the product managers that show my group, you know, I'm in a software building and selling business. So I'm like direct revenue for the things that I do. They talk about value, price, cost. So, you know, I feel a bit different as a product manager than the product managers that live at banks, or maybe, you know, DIY companies and things like that, or retail, where a lot of times those product managers are serving internal stakeholders that may not see a direct line of revenue from the products they're creating, and even incremental if it's B2C or B2B or B2G. And so I almost have these two groups I've been thinking about, where it's like direct or indirect product management. And so, and if you think about those two groups, then the business part of the product manager maybe changes depending on where they live inside of the organization. Because as I'm talking to these guys, I want to talk about, you know, how do we talk about pricing? How do we talk about sales positioning for your product, and reaching out to your customers and doing that iteration? And they're like, we just have to be technical and work. You know, they get pushed down to a different level because they're internal stakeholders, and they don't see the revenue component of the work they're putting together.
That's such a wise point, because as I think about it, and I know I've had this conversation with others before, I have never not been a product manager or product leader for something I didn't have a P&L for, right? I had a product that was being sold, a B2B SaaS or content solution, and I could do a P&L, right? I could look at this back of the napkin and whether it's some of these platform type things where you're owning a component and that component does not have direct revenue, or in these more internal product, you know, banking type stuff as you talked about. Like I've got a client I'm working with now where there are parts of the product that have, you know, no direct impact on the revenue or the renewal. And it's like, how do we tie business outcomes to the work they're doing? If well, maybe if we increase daily active users or number of searches or something, maybe we can look at some of those leading indicators, but it's a totally different ball game than if you actually have a P&L.
Right. And thus the product managers that are born kind of and raised in that space for many years, they may have a hard time transitioning to the business piece if they go to, say, a direct type of product manager who could have a P&L, because the thought process is a little different to think about those things. And so there's almost a business training needed for product managers that will make the conversion to, you know, a sales directed product.
Training, you say, on business and strategy?
Absolutely.
Actually, we do have some of that with our principles of product strategy. Some of it's also covered in fundamentals. We also do it a lot with workshop and coaching. there is a huge gap. We did a survey, and I should have these numbers memorized by now, Steve, and I put them in my post on this earlier, but it's something like a 53-point gap between product leaders. It was 91%, I think was what it was. 91% of the product leaders said that business and strategy skills are important or very important in their team. And it was 30-some% said their team's competence was good or very good. So it was a 50-some point gap between how important the product leaders thought it was and what they thought the competence was. And so there's a huge gap. And I think Scott may have hit the nail on the head. Why part of this is that there's been a huge number of people added with product manager titles that aren't doing what some of us who were doing product management 20 years ago were calling product management. So Gal, I'd love to get your take on this. Are we, has it slid too technical? Are we putting product management on roles that were used to not be product management?
I mean, I think to Scott's point, I think what happens is that a lot of times, especially when, younger folks or like from engineer, you want to try to come into product, you will be given like, this is the problem is solved. We know why we need to do this. You kind of like come in and like start execution of it. And like that has been a big entry point for a lot of people into the product management. And, with, things like AI or any other technical things, it's much easier to kind of like quickly get into like what needs to be done for like this particular thing or like what needs to be shipped. So kind of like the focus completely shifts from why we're doing this or, what is the business value of this, because that takes time, right? It does take time to understand that, to build expertise, to understand in a, within the industry you're in. And that's why I think the focus and the shift is like, you will see it like swing more toward the technical because, maybe the leadership, they just focus, yeah, we got that part. We just need you to kind of like focus and go and like execute on it. And like people from engineering background come in and they very familiar with that. And we have this recipe of like, this is how you need to go about it, whether it's agile or something else. So I think that's why you will see the pendulum swing more, or you will see with like all the buzzwords around AI, like there is this like hunger about like, I need to know about all the models and everything around this, but in reality, I think what all of you kind of pointed is really important, but that takes time and expertise to kind of be able to have executives trust your opinion and your insight on like why they should give this to you or like let you decide. It's their company, right? So I think that's some of the like observations I've seen into like why the pendulum is swinging more and more toward execution, technical, and less on, why it needs to be, why is this going to be, or like this fear of like sharing a lot of like revenue or important business with the rest of the company and kind of keeping it very, very close, and then kind of having these ideas and kind of like, I think there is a market for it, so you guys go build it. This is it. You figure it out. You execute on it.
Yeah, and I think it goes back to something Scott said in his initial answer. It's like product management is something where we're coming. Most successful product managers, at least when coming up when I did, came from somewhere else. They came from engineering. They came. Well, I don't think I've ever seen one come from finance or in accounting. I have seen them come from sales. I came from market research and strategy.
I've seen them come from finance and accounting.
Okay. We've been sort of talking about this pendulum type thing. I want May and Steve to have a chance to again, I'm glad we went first with Scott because he got to say his words first before everybody else took the good stuff on this answer. And actually, I think he did a great job with it. Any more thoughts on this, May?
Yeah, so I was thinking about this, and I think the answer is yes, product management is moving to the more technical side, but also No. It's kind of diverging, if anything, because it's people are nervous. It's especially people who didn't go through the first round of the tech crash earlier, before I was really aware of what's going on in the world.
Are you talking about the 2008 tech crash or the 2001 tech crash?
Yeah.
Because
I-
I don't know which scars.
There's
to
only
be-
a few of us who were around for the 2001 tech crash
Right?
in this role.
Yeah, so like, was I even aware of that one? We'll never know. So I was thinking about just why are people doubling down on technical product management, or otherwise non-technical product management? Like, why do people do that, right? And the not answer, but generally speaking, it's because people stick to what they know. People stick to what they grew up with. If you are a product manager who grew up in a technical organization or a series of technical led organizations where the only thing you've ever seen, like the only PMs that were ever successful were technical PMs, then you're going to do that because you don't know otherwise, right? Whereas if you didn't come from a technical background and you've grown up in a place where you get people from all backgrounds in your organization doing product, and you do product well, like it does, and you found that it doesn't matter, and people just learn enough to work with the technical side, then that's the direction you're going to go in. You say, well, it's not relevant because we care more about the business role. But at the end of the day, I'm not saying that the technical PMs can't lead in the business role. They're able to kind of communicate and translate to the technical side. But like, why this comes in this form is the culture that's been built at those organizations. It's the cultures that have been experienced across these people's careers, and that's what they decide is important, right? Like, think about all of these founders who are now tightening the control grip, and like not letting product managers do their job of like saying what's strategic and what's aligned and how you do it, and they need to know everything, right?
Yeah.
So like, again, it goes back to culture. It goes back to like people sticking to what they know because they're nervous, and we're in a time of uncertainty. That's all it is.
Yeah.
Right.
Steve, any last thoughts on this whole? We've reconfiguring of the question by Scott about the fact there's a whole bunch of people who have a product manager title that aren't doing what we might have considered product management, and this pendulum that I know you and I have talked about.
Well, I've seen it over the decades. When I was first coming up, it was clearly a business role. And then in 5 years later, it has shifted over into very much a technical role. And then it became a kind of a marketing role, and then back to a business role. I mean, it continues to move around. But I think that I guess the really interesting question is defining both of those terms, product and management, right?
Yeah.
And I think a lot of it has to do with, our founder was technical, so they're going to skew towards hiring technical people, or our founder was more of a business person, and they'll skew the other way, perhaps. And I'm just reminded of the drivenses that I used to talk about. Companies start as technology driven, and then they hire a strong VP of sales, and suddenly we're sales driven. And then they hire a brand manager to take over marketing, and suddenly we're brand driven. And then finance says, we seem to have spent an awful lot of money on all this branding junk. Let's start managing our costs. And then we become cost driven, and we cut everything. I mean, the ideal company size for a CFO is one, right? The CFO. Everyone else can be outsourced. And then at some point, the founder kicks back in and says, you know what, we need to go back to our technical roots, and we start all over again through that. And I think that's the pendulum that we're going through right now.
I can easily see that. And I will say, I always get new perspective. There was a couple things. Marlon Davis put in the chat. He was talking about how there's a real difference between companies 100 million and over versus 100 million and less. And the reality is most of my formative years were at companies that were 100 million or more. And I think it gives I came from, to Scott's point earlier, I came from a marketing and strategy background, market research and strategy, which sort of lends to me being more about that business and strategic role, because that's the lens I came into it from. And I think part of it is, sort of in line of what you're saying is there are gaps at companies, right? I came into companies that had market understanding and strategy gaps. So my skills were a fit to help them solve the problem they had at that time. There are times where people have a technology gap and maybe they need somebody who can bridge the business and technology, and it can be the right thing. But I think it's something that we need to figure out. How do we, what's the right balance? And I think just like every company is different, the right balance is probably going to be a little different. That being said, it's a balance. I think I feel like it needs to be a combination. I am not you have to have an engineering degree to be a software product manager. I didn't, but I understand why having some of the technical skills. I could, on the whiteboard back in the day, draft and draw up an N-tier architecture and understand why we needed an N-tier architecture. I understood database calls and APIs and stuff like that. I think there is definitely a foundational level that we have to have for that type of stuff.
Before you leave that point, it is also funny. I used to ask, people used to ask me about, should I be technical? Yeah, you have to be technical enough, right? And then they would say, well, I'm not very technical. And I'm like, well, tell me what that means. I'm not technical. And they're like, well, I can do, a little bit of SQL. I've written some JavaScript, and I've set up a couple of websites, and, I'm kind of a power user of, whatever. And I'm like, dude, what is your comparison here? When we say, are you technical, we mean compared to salespeople, not compared to developers.
So I got a couple questions I want to do sort of in a row. And I'm going to start with, why is it important to have this business aspect, this business role? And I'll go to you, Scott, because you talked about it earlier, but think about if we're talking to somebody, if you're talking to a product leader, one of your clients one of these people you've been trying to help the past 20 years, whether people are not business-wise, how do you explain why it's important to have this business role or facet?
Depending on the conversation, it's like what level in the organization I'm having, like whether I'm talking about funding and budgeting and allocation and positioning, or if I'm just talking about why should they keep cutting us a paycheck, and really bringing back the Don Reinertsen had a quote about economic language being the lingua franca. Like if you're going to have a conversation of should we make an investment? Okay, let's talk in the language of investment, not what is the feature and what are the acceptance criteria, what's the specification we need to write. Like those are all dependent variables, not independent variables. All of that stuff should be driven by why you're trying to do it. And so what I end up, I don't think I've ever run into somebody where the challenge was to convince them that we needed the investment to have some sort of a return, that there needed to be something like that. It was always how do we do it? And as you guys have alluded to, the thing that's getting in the way, it's different everywhere. Even within the same organizations from team to team. When I was, bouncing across a auto manufacturer with 12,000 people in their IT department, it wasn't a homogenous IT department, right? There were a bunch of several hundred people departments that all operated in very different ways. And taking my cue from Reinertsen, what I tried to lean into was the value proposition, and to say there is some connection of things we want to go do and why we think they're worth doing. And then start there, whether I'm showing up with a group that can lean into benefit for the customer, which is super healthy, right? Like we think I don't know, if I put on my my West Coast product manager cosplay outfit and I would say it's about product market fit. Yes, as a means to an end, because of the economics of the way startups are funded. Like, yeah, let's place 1,000 bets, and all I want you to do is figure out if the customer cares. And 1 out of 1,000 bets is going to pay off. Or, right, if I put on my East Coast outfit, I'm like,
And are you referring to Phil Hornby's post yesterday?
Yeah,
which
absolutely.
was amazing.
Yeah, it was wonderful. Right. So the idea of being able to come back and say, here's why something's worth doing, that value proposition is something concrete and tangible. And every team that I've come across, regardless of how messed up their environment is, can focus on that right now. Whether it's a leader encouraging their people to put it together of, tell me why we should do this, or somebody trying to manage up and pull themselves out of a feature factory to say, here's what we expect to happen if we do this. It changes those conversations, and it brings a necessity of the minimum amount of business acumen. Steve, you talked about being more technical than a salesperson. It's like understanding better finance than a assembly programmer.
Oh,
right? It's the same level.
There's a term, marginal. I have to see if I can find it. Somebody was talking about, like, it was an AI type question. It was like, if AI can do things, we can reallocate people to things where they're marginally better than the alternative of not doing it. And it was an interesting mind frame, but you just made me think about it. It's like, I don't need to be the best FP&A person. I need to be better than what's happening now to help us make the decision. Sort of that type of, I love that. So, Gol, I wanted to go to you. I noticed you when Scott started talking, going, so true. I think I was reading your lips.
Yeah, I mean, I think, to Scott's point, another thing that is the main driver is that, like, if you don't know the business and you don't know the problem you're solving, you're going to have problem figuring out what the solution is going to be, and like everything downstream from there. Like, I was just in a conversation today, the VP of data, and we were trying to figure out how to solve something, and it kept coming back, like, well, what is the problem you're trying to solve, and what is the expected outcome you want to have? Because that's driving, what sort of data we need to collect, what sort of models we need to do. So, like, I think that's what is so valuable and powerful, because it just doesn't apply to even one area. It goes through all the areas, whether you're working with like engineer or design or data science or however, or marketing, knowing that, like, business value, the value prop of, like, what can people do with this to help them, why they're using this can be used in so many different ways, whether, understanding how to design it, how to build it, what type of data to pull in, how to market it. So that's, I think, it's the main thing that's driving all of this, right? Like, and that's why I think it's very important to have that business knowledge, as opposed to, like, just these are your marching orders and go.
Completely, that holistic view. I mean, there's, I do not fall into that the product manager is CEO of the product, but I do believe that the CEO and product management are like the two people who have the lens looking across the whole life cycle, right? From strategy to post-sale support and end of life, eventually, where it's doing it. We work with everybody across that. And it's like, I think that to your point, you have to be able to have all those conversations, all the different dependencies that we're working with. I love that. Thank you. Steve actually made me think about the Three Blind Men and the Elephant, right? And in many ways, all the different functions who are doing their part, writing code, designing something, marketing something, they're all different blind people looking at a different lens. And in product management, this business role of product management, the strategic role of product management, wow, we try to bring this whole picture together and help all these people understand how it all works together. Am I overstepping there?
No, I like that. I love that analogy, as you know.
I know.
We do need somebody who's got the holistic view. Instead of, I'm just seeing my part, I'm just seeing the code, I'm just seeing the data, I'm just seeing the programs and so forth. But I'm also reminded in the three men and the elephant reminded me of the product management triad.
Right.
That the reality is some of us have strong business skills, some of us have more technical skills, some of us have more sales and marketing skills. And those three types of product managers working together end up being generally a very good format for building a product management team, rather than let's hire one person and have this expectation that they can do a 5-year financial model as well as set up a web page or a landing page.
Yeah. No, completely and totally. And I'm not saying that product management shouldn't be the sole person who gets it. There should be the people who help everybody else understand that holistic view, right? If we hold it to ourselves, it's not doing us any good. If we help everybody see the vision and how everything comes together and how they play a part in it, we're all in this together, right? Let's do that. May, you gave me a this when I asked if I overstepped.
I think that won't sit well if you go to a head of sales and say those words, or a head of development and say those words. Those are politically unsafe words to say. But I think one of the things that we do is get all of these organizations and teams with fairly different goals and objectives and start aligning them in the same direction, right? Because at the end of the day, sales sell the product that we build. Services or ops
Wouldn't that be
implement
nice?
the product that we build, right? Like, at the end of the day, we're gonna have to build it if it's contractually required. Build is time agnostic. But also, like, development builds the thing, like does the work of building. Design does the a whole lot of the research and the designs around what we actually sell. And in a way, like, that's the business, right? The business is every single part of this whole product, and we're trying to make sure it's successful. And that success isn't just getting development to build the right thing. It's also like being able to sell it, making sure there are customers who want to buy it, making sure the existing customers who continue to pay us money want to continue to give us money, right? Like, so all of those things come together, and like, we have to think about the whole product. We have to think about the objectives across really the top of the organization and make sure they're aligned so that the work that we do as individual contributors across a whole company can also be aligned.
No, I love that. And yes, you can't do it as a we're the people bringing everybody together. It's got to be, you've got to sort of, and this is going to go to the next question, but I want to give Jason a chance. How do we get people to understand and do it arm in arm with us? So Jason, your thoughts on this?
On which? I have lots of thoughts.
Share what you want.
Yeah, it's interesting. I was in a product manager at a sub $1 million company, $100 million company. And if I know the exit strategy of the organization, I can improve the return on that exit strategy if I know what it is by what I put and do with the products. Mm-hmm. And it gets, so when we talk about the business level, it's not just, our customers are buying this, why, but also why are we in this business? What is our future for this? Are we a lifestyle company? Are we an acquisition company? Are we trying to get strategically acquired? Are we going to go after PE? And even that can drive your product strategy to the customers you acquire. It could be, let's just make our current customers happy. It could be just sprint to acquire new customers at any cost, ignoring your current customers. Like, there are strategies there for organizational wide. And so when I talk to my product teams who are heavy in the weeds, some of it, it's like, I have to coach them. I'm like, why are we in business? Why are our stakeholders in business? Are we public, private? What are the expectations there, and what is the 5-year, like, we can even pontificate, what is the 5-year plan? And I would even ask them, if you were CEO, what would you do with the organization? Not the product, but the organization, because I think that mindset can be even more into the why. And we talk about the business acumen of product and the business part of product. I think it goes even higher level than just what the customer's needs are.
Yeah, I look at what you just said there, and it resonated so much, and I'm going to take it in two places. One is, product management helps translate the corporate strategy and vision into execution. We're a bridge, and I've written that as a blog, right? That's part of what we have to do, right? Help people understand what we're trying to do. The second is, like, we're not just translating it, we're also helping find the right product strategy, the right road path. Marlon Davis just said in the chat on LinkedIn, it's the value creation plan, right? Obviously 5-year holds and exit plans, very private equity sounding, but it's like, if we understand those exit plans, to your point, what is our strategy? We want to shift from services to more SaaS because the margins are bigger, or we want to get this new, that's a place that this business skill, this business acumen is so hopeful too, I guess, but so helpful in helping us figure out where we want to go. I got one question last I want to ask before we do our wrap up. It's what's your advice to a product leader who's trying to make their team more business focused, more business oriented? Where do you start? What's your advice? How to do this? Jason, I'll give you a chance to start because you sort of talked about how you're doing it.
That's a good question, and I do this actively. I ask them. I try to put them in the shoes of other parts of the organization so they can get that perspective. We talk about the CFO and the army of one, that kind of thing. I'm like, okay, we're the CFO. Well, how would you make the decision? What will your perspective be? What about support? Often ignored when we talk about product is the support process and making products that are easy to support. How do you see this from that lens? And once they can start seeing things from other areas that they may not have experience in, then you start getting a more rounded, holistic view of the product. And I just challenge them on that. And then going up to the CEO, or if you were owner of this company as it stands now, what would be your strategy? My daughter who was at UGA had a project on Netflix, and this is before Netflix had advertising and tier pricing models. And their challenge was to come up with, how can Netflix make more money? And since additional subscriptions are limited, and there's an obvious thing, right? That's advertising, and that's a product thing, the product manager pieces to think about. Like, how can we bring more revenue when additional subscriptions are tricky? Then you start bringing in more stakeholders. And so, you have to understand those other components because it's really going to drive your product strategy.
No, it is completely and totally. I love that. So, Gol, what's your advice to a product leader who's trying to make their team more business oriented?
So I would align with what Jason said. Like, two things I think for product is important to look at is, like, what are the problems that the customers are trying to solve, why do they using our system or solution or whatever, and then how we will make money out of it, right? If you put that lens on, and then to Jason's point, trying to understand, okay, as an organization, what are the things we need to consider to be able to support that drives a lot of clarity and make you consider things that you wouldn't necessarily consider before. So that's a good way to kind of shift focus from the technical aspect or design aspect, or very, very one lens, to kind of be able to look at this and kind of think through it end to end, not just for what we're delivering for the customer, but also how it makes money and how it benefits the company.
So empathy is not just a superpower when it comes to the customer, it's also a superpower when it comes to our internal stakeholders.
Turns out.
Wow. May.
So I learned this from a product marketing conference, and one of the things that really stuck with me is they ran a contest, and this was really for sales, but I think you should do it across the organization. which is make a 1-minute video that is an elevator pitch for our product. Because that tells you how much the whole organization knows about what is the real value add, what is the real value drivers, and the strategic direction of this product. Like, what are you trying to solve? And if your product team doesn't have the same answers, that might be a good thing and that might be a bad thing, but it shows everyone like where everyone's at. And it starts allowing you to answer the question, like, what do we need to do from here? Because there's no right answer, right? The issue could be high level strategy. The issue could be a lack of alignment either at the top. The issue could be middle management's not talking talking to each other. The issue could be we have absolutely no access to data or no access to customers. Whatever it might be, like, you need to go and look into that. You need to do a great deal of really discovery internally of what's the biggest challenge that's stopping your people from being business minded, right? Because half the time people are doing what they think they're supposed to be doing because that's the culture of the company. You've set that expectation, and in order to change it, you need to understand why it's happening.
Actually, that's a good follow-up question there, but I want to give Scott and Steve a chance. We'll see what we have time to get to it, but I love this idea of what are the blockers that are preventing it, holistically. Every company's different, but if we have the time, I want to sort of get to it quickly, maybe a quick lightning round type stuff. Scott, your thoughts. What's your advice? I mean, you've been doing this for 20 years.
Yeah. The most important thing is to meet the team where they are. And so I'll give a concrete example, and I'll pick a team that already knows how to do customer benefit analysis. They can look out and say, this is what I want to do with my product because here's how it helps my customer. They've got that ability. Then what we're going to do is we're going to make some shoes for the cobbler's kids. We're going to take that skill set and apply it to ourselves and say, this is the model of our business. This is how our business makes money. Right? The big firms will call it a value driver tree. I used to use a value lever model to develop it. I heard a phrase from Dan Olson, 15 years ago, of build a model for your business. Like understand what your growth engine is. Do you build your business through referrals? Are you trying to address cost challenges internally? Like, what is it that if you could get better at it would improve your company? And then that tees right into the conversation that Jason was hinting at about, are we looking for enterprise valuation? Are we trying to generate a dividend revenue stream? And because we're cash flow centric, are we a cog in the machine of a broader portfolio of companies where we're trying to provide a service as part of an end-to-end offering and we just need to cover our own costs? Like there's something a little bit different in every situation, but basically you take that customer benefit analysis lens and you point it at yourself.
Love that. Thank you, Scott. Steve, advice.
Oh, I'll make it real quick. I think it's really interesting in working with product teams to ask individuals, what is your greatest expertise? Are you a better developer than developers? Are you a better salesperson than the salesperson? I mean, what value add do you have here? And one hopes, it's something like, I'm an expert on the industry and the market, and I'm an expert in finding friction for our customers as they try to use our products, as opposed to, I'm really good at JavaScript. So I think it's like, what is your expertise? And one of the other exercises I like to do is have them write how they would describe their role to executives and to developers and to salespeople and to marketers. What's your own personal 10 words of how I add value to this company?
I love that. That's great. A lot of it's about how do we make sure that we're helping people understand the role of product management and how we can be helping their organization. Right. It's not just understanding them and their needs, but we also have to help them understand us and what we do. I don't have time to go to everybody on this. Does anybody, blockers, right? What are the biggest blockers you see preventing companies from making this switch, to preventing people from becoming more business oriented?
I'll throw permission out there and see where that thread goes.
Yeah. I love it.
Well, and I'll retort that a little bit. I've had numerous occasions over the years where somebody will demand permission, and I suggest that they should ask for forgiveness. But I was teaching, I think I was teaching personas, and there was a person in the room with his arms crossed and said, "I can't do that here." I'm like, really? What prevents you from writing a persona document and talking about personas in meetings? I mean, do you get reprimanded in HR? Do you have to take a sabbatical to get back to the code or something? I mean, what's the downside here? And but I totally hear Scott's point. I mean, it does seem that everything not mandated is forbidden in a lot of organizations.
Yeah. Any other?
Stay in your lane is a real thing, and
yeah,
I'm doing that because I don't want to get fired. Like these things are out there. These places exist. The people we try and help are stuck in them sometimes.
Yeah.
Indeed.
All right.
But I think there's an awful lot of civil disobedience that can go on that isn't just, going up and slapping somebody in their face, but just saying, "Hey, let me tell you a little bit about a problem I encountered the other day with a persona," I'm
with you. I'm team provocateur all the way, my friend.
Okay.
We'll use that at the end of the blockers. We always finish this up with what's your key learning and takeaway, right? So amazing conversation, so many places to go with it. What's your key learning? What's your key takeaway from this conversation? I'm going to start with Jason.
Yeah, obviously different companies, different organizations, different products have a different perspective on what the business means to them. And so it's not a one size fit all is my biggest takeaway.
Love that. Sogal, biggest takeaway or learning?
I love that that what Scott alluded to in terms of like, what is the main thing that makes you better at you doing? Have you figured that out and apply that, not just to your customer, but to your organization? That's, I think, something that's quite simple, but it's so powerful.
Yeah, I love it. Scott.
I think my big takeaway is from some of Jason's perspective of product people who are focused on components of platforms or enabling capabilities that might be a couple stages decoupled from understanding the value of their propositions.
Yes, completely. Awesome. May.
I'm trying to digest what Scott said about economics and using that as a language to tie everyone together, but also how does this translate to, say, a nonprofit or something where profits aren't the motive. So just that's in my head right now.
Love it. My friend Steve.
I guess my takeaway, just maybe mostly from the last bit here, is the directors and VPs of product need to do a much better job of supporting their people. I read the other day, only 20% of product managers have ever had training in product management. That seems like that's problematic. Scott points out, stay in your lane is something that we frequently hear. Well, that's not really something that a product manager should be dealing with. It's something their management should be dealing with. So I guess my takeaway is, hey, VPs and CPOs, protect your team.
Yeah, I love that. Everything everybody said, yes, and I'm going to go back to Jason's comment, and Jason sort of wins this one with getting multiple people referencing Jason. The whole idea of understanding what the exit strategy is, what's the vision, where you're going, how important that is, and how we can help. If we can help our product managers understand that can help connect and help the whole company understand that. So, guys, thank you so much. What a wonderful conversation. I love these. I learn, I grow, and I get to talk to some of my favorite people in the world to talk to. So thank you guys so much. So hopefully we can get you on some future ones. In 2 weeks, we're going to do one on the decades in product management. We're bringing some of the old timers. Steve will be on it, of course. Barb Nelson, former instructor of pragmatic marketing. Pamela Schur, former 280 group person, the author of one of the co-authors of Product Management for Dummies, and Rich Mironoff. So that's in 2 weeks. It's going to be talking about what can we learn now, what through the decades, what are the learnings that we can apply to what's going on right now. And Vineet Singla had said in the chat, Steve's book, The Strategic Role of Product Management, was the best book he ever read. It was a book from back in the day at Pragmatic. Be on the lookout. There may be some updates coming. So thanks, everybody. What a wonderful conversation. We'll see everybody. And thank you. Take care. Have a great weekend.
Bye-bye.